After some contemplation, Han Li shook his head to rid himself of his current train of thought before heaving a long sigh. Under these circumstances, he was no longer able to control his own fate, so he would just have to adapt as the situation developed. He sat down with his legs crossed, then pulled out the black bone ring that was Taoist Master Bone Shine's storage tool. He and Shi Chuankong had been busy traveling all this time, so he never had the chance to inspect the contents of the ring. With that in mind, he closed his eyes and injected a wisp of spiritual sense into the bone ring, and only after inspecting the contents of the ring for close to an hour did he reopen his eyes. Immediately thereafter, 8 white stone pillars that were around half a foot tall each appeared on the ground in front of him amid a flash of azure light, along with a white bone badge and a black statue. The 8 stone pillars were giving off a faint white glow, and they were none other than the 8 bone pagodas. Every single one of the bone pagodas were giving off formidable bone-withering law power fluctuations, and even though there was currently no one controlling the pagodas, Han Li could still feel his own skeleton trembling incessantly within his body. These 8 bone pagodas were most likely Taoist Master Bone Shine's bonded devilish treasures, and even though Han Li was unable to control them, he could definitely make use of the tremendous law powers that they contained. A faint smile appeared on his face as he summoned his profound heavenly gourd, and a burst of green light shot out from within before sweeping up the 8 bone pagodas. The pagodas were sucked into the profound heavenly gourd, where they were shredded into pieces. 8 balls of white light then emerged within the profound heavenly gourd, every single one of which was giving off astonishing law power fluctuations. An elated look flashed through Han Li's eyes upon seeing this. These 8 balls of bone-withering law powers were extremely formidable, and they could serve as trump cards for him in battle. Right as he was about to withdraw his spiritual sense from the profound heavenly gourd, the 8 balls of bone-withering law powers suddenly converged before slowly fusing together. A surprised look flashed through Han Li's eyes upon seeing this. It didn't take long before the 8 balls of white light fused as one into a collective ball of white light that was around 2 to 3 times the size of each individual ball of light. Furthermore, a gray bone projection had appeared within the ball of light. The law power fluctuations released by this ball of light weren't as formidable as before, but a sense of foreboding welled up in Han Li's heart as he observed the gray bone projection. However, his apprehension quickly turned into elation once again. He could sense that this bone projection possessed tremendous power, and he was confident that it could pose a threat even to a great encompassment cultivator. After observing the bone projection for a while longer, he set down the profound heavenly gourd, then picked up the white bone badge. It was riddled with countless tiny characters, and it contained Taoist Master Bone Shine's primary cultivation art, the bone-withering scripture, as well as some of his cultivation insights. The bone-withering scripture was fit to serve as the primary cultivation art for a great encompassment stage devilish cultivator, so it was definitely extremely valuable, but Han Li didn't have much use for it. His focus was still on cultivating the laws of time, and he had already collected many time attribute cultivation arts that he was still yet to fully master, so there was no way that he would distract himself by throwing even more cultivation arts into the mix. With that in mind, he quickly skimmed through the contents of the cultivation art, but paid particular attention to some of the cultivation insights at the end. A few minutes later, he stowed the bone badge away, then picked up the black statue. The statue was only around the size of his hand, and it depicted a devilish deity with 3 heads and 6 arms, seated on the ground in a strange posture. Han Li carefully inspected the statue for a while, following which a burst of translucent light shot out of his glabella before vanishing into the statue. The statue immediately began performing a series of motions, as if it had sprung to life, and with each action that it performed, a passage of text would appear on its back. However, Han Li couldn't understand even a single character, and it seemed to be some type of ancient language. Han Li didn't know what this black statue was, but for some reason it had caught his attention, and that was why he had decided to summon it out of Taoist Master Bone Shine's storage ring. There were a total of 12 postures that the statue could adopt, and each posture corresponded with a different passage of text. After some contemplation, Han Li flipped a hand over to summon a blank jade slip, using which he recorded the 12 passages of text in the hope that he would be able to unearth their meaning someday. On top of these items, the storage ring also contained many other things like materials, devilish origin stones, and pills. However, none of these items were particularly valuable, so he couldn't be bothered to sort through them. What was worthy of note was that Taoist Master Bone Shine's storage ring contained over 2 million devilish origin stones, which was almost certainly going to be enough to cover his costs during his time in the Devil Realm. Han Li summoned Taoist Zai to his side, then handed him the black bone ring as he requested, "Brother Zai, please sort through the items in this storage ring for me. If you find anything useful inside, feel free to take it." Taoist Zai nodded in response, then accepted the ring before sitting down with his legs crossed. Meanwhile, Han Li exited the flower branch domain before returning to his room, and at this point, it was already dark outside. All of a sudden, he raised an eyebrow as he cast his gaze out of the room. It was only for an instant, but he had detected an extremely faint aura outside, as if someone were spying on him. After a brief hesitation, he decided not to investigate. He was an outsider as far as those in the Devil Realm were concerned, so it was only to be expected that Shi Pakong would conduct surveillance on him. As long as Shi Pakong didn't take things too far, he was happy to turn a blind eye. With that in mind, Han Li made his way into the inner chamber of his room, then sat down onto the bed with his legs crossed. The night quickly passed by, and the sound of door knocking rang out from outside the courtyard early the next morning. Han Li opened his eyes and rose to his feet, then made his way out into the courtyard to discover that Shi Chuankong had come to visit. "Did you have a good rest last night, fellow Taoist Li?" Shi Chuankong asked with a smile. "It was the safest I'd felt in a very long time," Han Li replied with a smile, then stepped aside to allow Shi Chuankong into the courtyard. "It's all right, I won't go in. I've only just returned to Night Sun City, and there are many matters for me to take care of. I came here on this occasion as I have to speak to you about something," Shi Chuankong said as his face fell ever so slightly. A hint of foreboding welled up in Han Li's heart upon hearing this, and he prompted, "Go ahead, fellow Taoist Shi." "It's about the Grand Priest. I raised the matter to my brother last night, and he told me that the Grand Priest has pledged his allegiance to my eldest brother, so it won't be so easy to recruit his services. However, we're already searching for a solution, and I'm going to follow through on my promise to you no matter what, so please be patient," Shi Chuankong said. Han Li's brows furrowed slightly as he said, "I don't want to exert any pressure on you, but I don't have much mid-grade Purple Sun warm jade left. My current supply will only last another decade or two at most, so please hurry." "You can rest assured of that, fellow Taoist Li. My brother has already sent someone to purchase Purple Sun warm jade, and I'm sure they'll return soon," Shi Chuankong reassured. Han Li's expression eased slightly upon hearing this. "In that case, I can wait a while longer." "Rest assured, fellow Taoist Li, I made a promise to you, and I'll do everything in my power to fulfill my promise as soon as possible," Shi Chuankong said with a determined expression. "I'll be counting on you then, fellow Taoist Shi," Han Li replied with a nod. The second thing that I wanted to notify you of is that I'll be going into seclusion to try and make a breakthrough to the high zenith stage, so I won't be around for a while. If you need anything, feel free to speak to the servants in the manor, Shi Chuankong said. I have to congratulate you in advance then, fellow Taoist Shi. With your aptitude, a breakthrough to the high zenith stage is all but assured, Han Li replied with a smile. Thank you for your kind words, fellow Taoist Li, Shi Chuankong said with a smile of his own. The two of them chatted for a while longer before Shi Chuankong departed. Following Shi Chuankong's departure, Han Li's expression darkened slightly, and he remained standing on the spot for a moment before returning to his room. Close to half a month flew by in a flash, and Shi Chuankong commenced his seclusion. Han Li had stayed in his room this entire time, with the exception of a visit that he had paid to Shi Chuankong prior to the commencement of his seclusion. He was planning to borrow some books from Shi Chuankong to see if he could find any information pertaining to Weeping Soul's condition, as well as to try and find material related to the cultivation of one's spirit domain. To this day, he still didn't know how he had defeated Taoist Master Bone Shine, and Taoist Master Bone Shine's spirit domain was different from any that he had ever seen before, so he was determined to learn more about the subject. He had thought that Shi Chuankong would have been hesitant to lend him such resources, but to his surprise, Shi Chuankong had brought him a stack of beautiful books that very same afternoon. Prior to his departure, he had informed Han Li that these books were from Shi Pakong's private collection, so they were not to be damaged. Otherwise, he would be reprimanded by Shi Pakong. On top of that, there were restrictions placed on the books, so they could only be read and not replicated. For the first few days, Han Li didn't begin his reading, and only after taking a few days to familiarize himself with the environment of the long pavilion garden did he begin browsing through the books. There were around a dozen books in total, all of which had solid metal covers that were embossed with extremely elegant flowers and exotic beasts, while the pages were fashioned from some type of soft and pliable, yet durable beast hide. The majority of the contents of the books consisted of material pertaining to spiritual damage or sealing nascent souls, and there were several devilish secret techniques in them that should have definitely been kept secret to outsiders. However, Han Li wasn't a devilish being, nor was he primarily using a devilish cultivation art, so he had no intention of cultivating these secret techniques. What was rather disappointing to Han Li was that he wasn't able to find any cases in the books that perfectly matched Weeping Soul's current condition. Her soul was unharmed, and even if it had been, all of the damage would have already been remedied by the Purple Sun warm jade, and her nascent soul wasn't sealed away, either. In the end, Han Li could only heave a forlorn sigh and prepare to devise other plans to have Weeping Soul's condition treated. He wasn't very optimistic about Shi Pakong's ability to secure the Grand Priest's help, now that the Grand Priest was in Shi Jianfeng's camp. After all, they were each other's biggest rivals in the fight for the throne, and there was no way that Shi Jianfeng would be willing to help Shi Pakong. As Han Li continued to read through the books, he saw a great deal of material pertaining to spirit domains, and his eyes were completely opened. Only after all of this reading did he discover that his previous understanding of spirit domains had been far too shallow. He had come into contact with many spirit domains in the past, including even creation-tier spirit domains like the ones unleashed by Xiao Jinhen and Feng Tiandu. After that, he was able to manifest his own spirit domain under Mo Yu's assistance, but the latter had withheld a lot of information from him, so he was only now able to systematically learn about spirit domains. Even though there were two tiers of spirit domains, namely the creation tier and the spirit form tier, there was no set sequence for which one had to be attained before the other, and one didn't necessarily have to reach the creation tier in order to manifest a domain spirit. However, the majority of cultivators in the immortal realm would choose to cultivate their spirit domains to the creation tier before making a push to the spirit form tier. This was not difficult to understand. Essentially, it was like building a house. Only after the house had been built and furnishings had been arranged would one generally move in. It wasn't unfeasible to pursue the spirit form tier right away, but that would essentially be like forcing your domain spirit to reside in a barren wilderness, and that would have detrimental effects on the domain spirit's future growth. In any case, both the creation tier and the spirit form tier took an extremely long time to reach, and doing so required a huge investment of resources and dedication. Even manifesting an ordinary spirit domain had proven to be quite a difficult endeavor for Han Li. Manifesting a creation tier spirit domain was an endeavor that was going to take tens of thousands of years at the very least, and it required fusing items of different attributes that complied with one's great Tao into the spirit domain to manifest objects like buildings, mountains, rivers, etc. On top of that, this wasn't a process that was guaranteed to succeed as long as one was willing to invest the time. Just like in pill and tool refinement, there was a chance of failure, and in the case of failure, whatever was being fused into the spirit domain would be destroyed in vain. Even if this endeavor proved to be successful, it would still take extensive periods of time for the objects that were fused into the spirit domain to reach a significant scale. For example, it had taken Taoist Master Bone Shine millions of years to construct those 8 bone pagodas in his spirit domain. As for giving rise to sentient domain spirits in a spirit domain, that was even more difficult. Very few cultivators were willing to spend so much time on this endeavor, as it massively delayed their cultivation progress. Hence, out of all of the high-grade cultivators that Han Li had encountered, even those at the great encompassment and high zenith stages, most of them only had ordinary spirit domains, while creation and spirit form tier spirit domains were exceedingly rare. Through his readings, Han Li had developed a newfound appreciation for spirit domains of these 2 tiers, but he didn't have that much time on his hands at the moment, so he wasn't planning to pursue the 2 tiers in the near future. Han Li sat down with his legs crossed, then closed his eyes and began to cultivate. The past century or so had been spent entirely on the run, so he hadn't actually even had a chance to carefully study the great 5 elemental illusion mantra that he had recompiled from the 5 time attribute cultivation arts. Having already cultivated the mantra axis scripture, the water divination time arts, and the illusory dawn treasured scripture, he had developed a good level of mastery over the laws of time, so he wasn't expecting to have much trouble cultivating the great 5 elemental illusion mantra. Over 3 years flew by in a flash. Han Li had already come out of seclusion, but Shi Chuankong was still in seclusion. Over these past 3 years of cultivation, he hadn't made much progress in the great 5 elemental illusion mantra, but he had discovered many misconceptions that he had previously held toward in his cultivation. For example, he had assessed that he was currently at a level equivalent to mastery over the 3rd level of the great 5 elemental illusion mantra, so he had thought that he would be able to make very smooth progress in the cultivation art, but that proved not to be the case. The great 5 elemental illusion mantra wasn't just a simple combination of the 5 cultivation arts. Instead, it had become much more profound and complex, requiring one to perfectly integrate the 5 elements with one another. Hence, in terms of overall progress, Han Li was actually still only on the 1st level. He had come out of seclusion not because anything had gone wrong during his seclusion. Instead, he had come out to check on Weeping Soul. After paying her a visit, he discovered that her condition was still the same as before, and there wasn't any news from Shi Pakong either. Ever since Shi Chuankong had gone into seclusion, Shi Pakong hadn't visited Han Li even once, but Han Li could sense that the surveillance on him had never ceased. Waiting around like this wasn't going to yield any positive outcomes, so Han Li decided to go out into Night Sun City to see if he could find any other way to save Weeping Soul. On this day, Han Li emerged from the long pavilion garden, and he was planning to travel out into the Imperial City. Along the way, he encountered many devilish cultivators in the manor, and all of them extended respectful bows to him, as they had been informed of his relationship with Shi Chuankong. Right as he was about to leave the garden, he suddenly heard someone call out from behind him. "Please wait a moment, Senior Lei." He turned to discover a petite black-robed woman jogging toward him. The woman was very youthful in appearance and had a set of sprightly facial features, and her aura indicated that she was an early body integration cultivator. "Do you have some instructions for me?" Han Li asked. "Of course not, Senior Li. You think far too highly of me. I was instructed by His Highness, the Third Prince, to serve as your guide whenever you go out so you can find your way around the city," the woman hurriedly replied with a respectful curtsy. Han Li's eyes narrowed slightly upon hearing this. It seemed like Shi Pakong was still quite apprehensive of him. The person that had been conducting surveillance on him had suddenly left a few days ago, and Han Li had been wondering why that was the case. It seemed that whoever had been conducting surveillance on him had been replaced by this young woman. Instead of continuing to conduct surveillance on him in secret, Shi Pakong had openly sent this woman to accompany him during his outings. "All right, I'll be in your care then," Han Li said with a smile. The young woman was ecstatic to hear this, and she said, "Please wait a moment, Senior Li, I'll summon a carriage for us." She removed what appeared to be a spirit beast pouch from her waist as she spoke, and a streak of azure light flew out from within, before transforming into a pair of horse-like horned beasts with azure scales all over their bodies. Connected to the pair of horse-like beasts was a luxurious black carriage that had no cabin, but there was a soft chair that could fit 3 people side by side. Han Li and the young woman got onto the carriage, following which the latter asked, "Where do you intend to go, Senior Li?" "I want to visit the areas in the city where there's an abundance of shops," Han Li replied. "All right, in that case, I'll take you to the Imperial River Market. That's one of the 8 largest markets in the Maha area, and it's also the one that's closest to us," the young woman replied. "What's your name?" Han Li asked with a smile. The young woman was clearly taken aback by this question, and she faltered slightly before replying, "My name is Hu Jingjing. You can call me Jingjing or Jinger." "All right, let's go," Han Li said with a nod. Hu Jingjing nodded in response, and with a flick of the reins, the 2 horse-like beasts set off. The Naraka area was enormous, and aside from the Imperial City, it also contained a huge imperial garden. The Imperial River Market was situated on the border of the Naraka area and the Maha area, and the two were separated by a branch of the holy river called the Imperial Garden River. To the left of the river was the Maha area, while the Naraka area was on its right, and the 2 areas were connected by an enormous white bridge. The Imperial River Market's name was derived from the Imperial Garden River, and it stretched for dozens of kilometers along the bank of the river across from the Naraka area. Once we enter the Imperial River Market, we can no longer travel by carriage, so we'll have to continue on foot. This is a rule laid down by His Highness, Shi Jianfeng, and it's applicable to all of the markets in the city, Hu Jingjing informed in an apologetic manner. "That's fine," Han Li replied with a nod. "What would you like to buy, Senior Li? The Imperial River Market is a massive place, and if you wander through it aimlessly, you could go days without finding what you're looking for," Hu Jingjing said. "I'm not looking for anything in particular. I intend to have a wander through the market, so why don't you tell me about the market's rough layout?" Han Li replied with a smile. Hu Jingjing duly obliged, giving Han Li a brief rundown of the layout of the Imperial River Market, before also telling him about some of the other large markets in the city. While listening to Hu Jingjing, Han Li swept his gaze over the surrounding area to find that the bridge was packed with carriages and pedestrians. Not far beside him was the railing of the bridge, and through it he could see a series of giant water-dwelling beasts, carrying beautiful Laochuans on their bags or dragging them along through the water. The largest and most prestigious shop in the Imperial River Market is one by the name of the Flowing Wind Pavilion, and His Highness, Shi Jianfeng, is the backer of the shop. Most of the items sold in the shop are of an extremely high caliber and also very expensive. The second largest shop is run by the vast Origin House, and it's only slightly inferior but has the best reputation, Hu Jingjing introduced. Is the vast Origin House headquarters here? Han Li asked. No, the vast Origin House shop in the Imperial River Market is only a branch, not the headquarters. The headquarters is also in the Maha area, but it's over in another market on the other side of the Maha area, Hu Jingjing replied. As they were speaking to each other, the carriage passed over the bridge and was stopped on the other side. From there, the two of them got down from the carriage and started traveling on foot. Continue, Han Li instructed. Hu Jingjing was very pleased that Han Li seemed to be listening very attentively to what she had to say, and she continued. The Imperial River Market has shops that sell treasures and materials from both our Holy Realm and the Immortal Realm. In particular, there's a shop called the Immortal Spirit Pavilion that specializes in selling wares from the Immortal Realm. As for the strangest shop in the market, that would have to be the Exotic Wares shop. Some of the items sold in the shop are enough to create a massive stir in the entire city, while other items are downright inexplicable. That's quite an interesting shop. Does it have any backers? Han Li asked. The backer of the Exotic Wares shop is His Highness, the 12th Prince Shi Jinkai, Hu Jingjing replied. Hu Jinka, does he share the same mother with the 5th Princess Shi Jingyan? Han Li asked. That's right. His Highness is a very interesting man. He's very handsome, but he has a very casual and easygoing personality, and he's never invested much time and effort into cultivation, so he's still at the true immortal stage. On top of that, he loves to travel and visit all types of secret areas and ancient immortal cave abodes. Many of the items sold in the Exotic Wares shop were personally gathered by him over the course of his journeys, Hu Jingjing replied. He dares to visit all those places even though he's only at the true immortal stage. Her sister must be constantly worried about him, Han Li chuckled. Indeed, I've heard that Her Highness has arranged for 3 high zenith cultivators and a great encompassment cultivator to look after him. Otherwise, she wouldn't be allowing him to embark on his journeys, Hu Jingjing replied with an amused smile. The two of them reached the entrance of the market, and looking up at the tall stone archway, Han Li suddenly stopped in his tracks as he said, "All right, you can go back now." Hu Jingjing's expression instantly stiffened upon hearing this, and a perplexed look appeared on her face. Han Li's smile faded as he said, "You know a little too much for a body integration cultivator. You've already led me to the Imperial River Market, and I know the way back, so there's no need for you to accompany me any longer." The smile on Hu Jingjing's face also gradually faded, and she extended an expressionless curtsy toward Han Li as she said, "As you wish." Han Li gave her a dismissive wave, then made his way into the market. Hu Jingjing looked on as Han Li slowly vanished into the crowd, and she stomped a foot onto the ground in frustration before making her way back toward the bridge. After walking for a while, Han Li took a backward glance to find that Hu Jingjing hadn't chosen to follow him in secret, and he gave a pleased nod before turning his attention to the shops that lined the street. The buildings in the Imperial River Market weren't as uniform in style as those in Shipakang's manor. Instead, There was a wide range of styles on display, and the streets were also extremely packed. Most of the people on the streets appeared to be no different from humans, retaining only minor devilish traits such as the odd scale, horn, or pupils of various colors. Of course, there were also some who looked completely identical to humans, so Han Li didn't stick out much in the crowd. After walking for a while, Han Li spotted a three-story pavilion that had been constructed more so in the style of the immortal realm, and hanging above its entrance was a plaque that read Immortal Spirit Pavilion. Compared with the neighboring shops, business was clearly a little slow for the Immortal Spirit Pavilion. Han Li stepped into the shop, and as soon as he did so, he immediately felt a burst of abundant, immortal spiritual power. As it turned out, there was a massive formation in the shop that could confine the surrounding spiritual chi and keep it enclosed within the shop. A young man in a scholarly robe emerged to approach Han Li, and he smiled as he asked, "What can I help you with today, esteemed customer?" "I was wondering why this shop has been opened in the capital city of the Devil Realm," Han Li inquired in a casual manner. "Just as there are devilish beings in the immortal realm, there are also human cultivators in the Devil Realm. You are precisely one of them, are you not? Our shop caters to foreign human cultivators like yourself," the young man explained, and Han Li nodded in response. "Can I help you with anything today?" the young man asked. "I would like to purchase some materials," Han Li replied, then pulled a list out of his sleeve before offering it to the young man. The man accepted the list, but as he inspected the items on it, his brows gradually began to furrow. The young man hesitated momentarily, then said, "All of these premium materials. I'm afraid our shop doesn't stock any of the materials on the list aside from the first two. However, if you'd like, I can consult my superiors to see if we can transfer stock over from elsewhere." "That would be great. Ideally, I'd like to have all of the items on the list ticked off," Han Li replied with a nod. "I'm afraid that's going to be very difficult. These materials are all extremely precious, and by estimates, we won't even be able to gather half of them, so you'll have to find the rest elsewhere," the young man said in an apologetic manner. "That's fine, just gather what you can," Han Li replied in a nonchalant manner. A large amount of resources must be expended to transfer stock over from the immortal realm, so if you're not in a hurry, you can wait for the next scheduled stock transference between the two realms. If you require these items urgently, then we can transfer the stock earlier than scheduled, but that's going to make the materials more expensive," the young man said. "It's fine, I can wait as long as it's not too long a wait," Han Li replied. "The next scheduled stock transference will be roughly in 10 years, the young man said. "How much extra will I have to pay to cover the transference cost?" Han Li asked. "According to the rules of our trading house, transferred stock will set you back an extra 10%, the young man replied. "Can I pay using immortal origin stones?" Han Li asked. "Of course," the young man replied with a smile. "All right, then I'll wait the 10 years, Han Li confirmed. "In that case, please come with me, and I'll bring out the two materials that we have in stock for your inspection," the young man said. Inside an elegant courtyard in the imperial city, Hu Jingjing rushed through the front yard, then drew to a halt in front of a beautiful white building at the very rear of the courtyard. Back when she was with Han Li, she had only displayed an early body integration stage cultivation base. Yet now, her cultivation base had swelled to the early golden immortal stage. She was just about to speak when the door in front of her opened up inward on its own, and she hesitated momentarily before stepping inside. The room that she stepped into was quite spacious, and there was a silver-haired man in a tight-fitting robe, gently stroking a brush over a huge canvas. The painting on the canvas depicted a tall and steep black mountain, standing on the summit of which was an indistinct figure, while a ferocious storm raged around them. At the very center of the painting was a bolt of white lightning that divided the entire image into two halves. "What happened, Jingjing? Why are you back so soon?" The silver-haired man was none other than Shi Pakong, and he turned to face Hu Jingjing with a warm smile on his face. Hu Jingjing extended a respectful curtsy, then began to deliver a recount of what had happened. She did so in an extremely detailed fashion, even going as far as to relay everything that Han Li had said to her word for word, as well as the expressions that he had displayed during their interactions. Shi Chuankong crossed his arms as he listened in silence, and only after Hu Jingjing had completed her recount did he ask, "You didn't try to follow him in secret after he chased you away, did you?" "You told me not to overstep any boundaries, so I didn't dare to try and follow him," Hu Jingjing hurriedly replied. "You did very well," Shi Pakong replied with a smile. A hint of hesitation flashed through Hu Jingjing's eyes, and it was clear that she wanted to say something. "What is it?" Shi Pakong asked with a smile. On the way to the market, he was very pleasant and easygoing, but his demeanor suddenly shifted at the entrance of the Imperial River Market, and part of the reason that I refrained from following him was because I was scared, Hu Jingjing revealed. "He did that intentionally to send a message. In the beginning, he allowed you to serve as his guide as a gesture of respect to me. He then dismissed you upon reaching the Imperial River Market to warn me not to overstep my boundaries, and it's clear that he's not very pleased with my surveillance measures, but he's expressing his discontent in a very tactful manner," Shi Pakong analyzed with a smile. "Such insolence from a mere human. Does he not know that he's currently in the capital city of our holy realm? I think you've been too kind and tolerant of him up to this point, Your Highness," Hu Jingjing said in a disgruntled voice. "That's enough. He's a guest of Chuankong's, so we should be respecting his boundaries. Instruct everyone not to conduct any further surveillance on him," Shi Pakong said. "Yes, Your Highness," Hu Jingjing hurriedly replied. "All right, you can go now," Shi Pakong said with a dismissive wave. Hu Jingjing immediately departed as instructed, while Shi Pakong turned to stare at the giant artwork with a thoughtful expression. After a long silence, he murmured to himself, "As expected, he's quite an interesting character." Li. Inside the Imperial River Market, Han Li had already left the Immortal Spirit Pavilion and arrived in front of a strange building that was situated by the river, with its entrance facing the river rather than the main street. The entire building was constructed from some type of black stone material, and it had a dome ceiling with circles of peculiar patterns etched onto its surface. At this moment, he was standing in front of the building, looking up at the plaque above the entrance, which read, "Exotic Wares Shop." After a brief hesitation, he made his way into the shop, and as soon as he did so, he discovered that there wasn't even a single customer inside. The items sold in the shop were split up into two clear sections, and hanging on the counter to the left was a black wooden sign that read, "Reserved for those who possess discerning eyes." The writing was very old, and a thick layer of dust had accumulated over the sign's surface. There was a wooden sign hanging from the counter on the right as well, and this one appeared a little newer, bearing the words, "Reserved for those who possess plentiful wealth." There was an employee standing behind each counter, and one of them was yawning in a sleepy fashion, while the other was engrossed in an antiquated azure book that he was reading. Upon closer inspection, Han Li discovered the book to be a raunchy romance novel, rather than any cultivation art. The employee's brows furrowed slightly with disdain at the sight of Han Li, and he turned away slightly before putting the book away. "How can we help you today? You won't find much legitimate wares in our shop, but we stock a lot of weird and wacky items," the employee declared, and Han Li was momentarily rendered speechless by this bizarre spiel. He took a glance at the shelves behind the employee to find that they were laden with all types of devilish treasures and pills, all of which were placed haphazardly with no rhyme or reason to be found. All of the items were of a high caliber, but the price tags attached were downright astonishing, and they were very expensive in Han Li's eyes, even after securing Taoist Master Bone Shine's entire wealth. However, after some inspection, Han Li didn't find anything that caught his eye, so he shook his head before turning to the counter on the left. The employee seemed to be accustomed to customers displaying no interest in the shop's wares, and he casually picked up his book again before continuing his reading. The items on the shelves behind this counter were strewn around even more haphazardly, and they had no price tags attached either. Han Li could see various beastly appendages on the shelves, some of which were still giving off a faint sheen, while others were looking completely withered and lifeless. Beside all of these appendages were many transparent vials that held spirit liquids of different colors, submerged within which were eyeballs that belonged to different types of beasts and even human cultivators. All of a sudden, an eyeball that resembled a gray rock caught Han Li's attention, and he pointed at it as he asked, "How much for that one?" Only then did the employee at the counter stop dozing off, and he turned to look at the eyeball in question in a bleary-eyed manner, then replied in a lazy voice, 3,500 devilish origin stones. "Why is it so expensive? Aren't these items supposed to be reserved for those who possess discerning eyes?" Han Li asked as his brows furrowed slightly. "They are indeed reserved for those who possess discerning eyes, but we never said that we were giving out these items for free." The employee yawned in a lazy manner. Han Li had no response to this. If he wasn't mistaken, the eyeball belonged to a mature primordial fey beast, so it was an item that contained time law powers. However, a restriction seemed to have been cast onto the vial that housed the eyeball, sealing in all of its energy fluctuations. Han Li turned his attention away from the eyeball, then asked, "Do you have any maps of Night Sun City here?" "We do, but there are some sensitive places in the Naraka area and elsewhere in the city that aren't displayed on the map," the employee replied. "That's fine. If you could throw in a brochure that introduces all of the noteworthy locations in the city, then that would be even better," Han Li said. "The map of Night Sun City costs 50 devilish origin stones, and we also sell journals that lay out all of the noteworthy locations in the city for 300 devilish origin stones each. If you want to purchase some pieces of information that aren't publicly available, we can help you as well, but those services will be rather pricey," the employee replied. Han Li hesitated momentarily upon hearing this, then said, "I'll pass for now.